Before we start our video, I would like say if you want to send a true horror story of yours, you can send it through email given in the description. Let's begin. Our parents rented a house on the 9th floor of an apartment complex as my dad was transferred for a couple of years. This was about 8 or 9 years ago. I stayed in a different city and used to go home for the holidays. Now, I'm a fairly nocturnal person and I am usually awake until 3 or am every day. I used to keep hearing the sound of thick anklets emanating from the terrace. This used to happen during the daytime as well, but the sound got thicker by night. It was a constant sound of walking. I mean, nobody walks that much, especially in their own house. I didn't pay much attention to it, assuming that it was some girl who keeps walking all the time. I asked my mum casually one day as to what the hell this was all about. Her reply made my hair stand on end. Apparently, our neighbor's young daughter died when they lived there, and she grew up all her life in these apartments. Everyone in my family hears the sounds, and turns out the others on the floor do too, ever since my mother happened to ask them. It was a holiday in school and a friend and I had planned to chill at the Mall Road and have some snacks. However, by the time we reached Mall Road, it was already PM. We had coffee, enjoyed clicking pictures and had amazing momos at a restaurant on the Ridge. At 9 o'clock, we started walking back to our respective homes. I had barely walked a few hundred meters when it started drizzling. I was at a section of a road which was very quiet and had no shops, but some of the streetlights were still on. As I walked further, I saw a man with an umbrella walking a few feet ahead of me. I thought it would be a good idea to ask if he would allow me to join him if he was going the same way. I walked faster, but it seemed that I wasn't fast enough, so I started jogging, but I still couldn't catch up with him. "Hello," I shouted loudly, and the man turned around. His age must have been somewhere in the late 60s, but what surprised me was the fact that despite having an umbrella, he was completely drenched. He started walking again, and this time I walked slowly. Perhaps I didn't want to be near him anymore. He slowed down too. I walked even more slowly, and so did he. Finally, I stopped. There was complete silence. He had also stopped. I could feel the fear suffocating my thoughts. Just when I thought that I may not live long enough to share this experience, I heard a siren blaring and a police vehicle stopped behind me. They asked me what I was doing here alone. When I told them this story, they said I was alone. There was no one there with an umbrella, and that I should stop sleepwalking. It was January 3, 2018. I was driving back after enjoying a solo holiday. It was around 10 p.m. and I was enjoying driving on empty roads. Suddenly, I noticed a lady waiting alone at a bus stand near Kashady and I slowed down a bit, stopping. Eventually, she looked old, tired, and had a bag which she grabbed and hurried towards my car. Something told me to be ready to accelerate soon. She knocked at my window asking me to roll it down, which I did. No more than 2 centimeters. My husband threw me out of the house, and I am all alone. My family lives about half an hour from here. Will you give me a ride? Please, I am no ghost, she pleaded, with an intriguing smile on her face. She was pale and had unkempt hair. I am not going that way. I am sorry. I lied and started accelerating. Good decision, she yelled from behind, and these words still send chills down my spine till date. I was in the 7th or 8th grade. I was home alone in the same house. My parents were gone for the day and it was a weekend. It was cold and dreary outside and I decided to do homework. I sat down at the kitchen table and laid out my books and notebook. To my left in the small house was the hallway. If you walk down the hallway, on the right side is the bathroom and then my bedroom. On the left side of the hallway is my parents' bedroom and my brother's bedroom. That's it. Small house. My brother worked all the time and was a lot older, so he wasn't home either. The house was dead silent. The house had that midday low-light hazy, dreary lighting effect to it due to the weather and not a lot of windows, which added to the peacefulness of the day. I was working on homework and everything was fine, and I was enjoying the time alone. From the end of the hallway to my left, a woman said my name. Again, it was my childhood nickname, and it was clear as day. My blood ran cold and I froze. I looked to my left to the end of the hallway and saw nothing. My jacket was nearby, and in one swift movement, I quietly closed my books and grabbed my jacket as my heart was in my throat. I started to cry with fear. I headed directly out the back door without looking back. I went to the stand-alone garage out back and sat on my dad's red lawnmower and watched the back door to see if anyone came out of the house. Although it would be impossible for anyone to be in the house other than myself because my family were the only people who had been home all day, I sat there shivering for hours until my parents got home. As soon as they pulled into the driveway, I met them and told them what had happened. They checked the house and found nothing and said it was my imagination. My mother still lives in the house and I live with her to help her now that she's elderly. My father died several years ago. Mom always heard Dad calling her name from the living room and talks about it often. She would go into the living room to ask him what he wanted, and he hadn't called her name. She still says it's her imagination. But at the end, we both know it's not, and we actually hear the voices calling our name. We cannot do anything about it. The incident which I am going to tell you about is about a very frightening experience, which both my mother and grandmother had many years back. My mother was fast asleep in the afternoon when I and my sister were in school, and my father, who was at his workplace, was not present at home. My mother had just opened her eyes to drink water, which was kept in front of her, when suddenly she saw a middle-aged British woman who was wearing a frock and had golden hair. My mother saw her and got scared badly and closed her eyes. The woman ghost came and slept beside my mother. My mother was scared to death and started praying to God. She said, after a long time, the doorbell rang and my father came. She did not tell about this frightening experience to anyone except for my grandmother, who dismissed it as hallucination. After a few years, when we all were out, my grandmother was alone at home, reading a cookery book. Suddenly she saw the same ghost, which my mother had mentioned to her, and which she had dismissed as my mother's imagination, with the same facial features and description as my mother had told her. My grandmother is now dead. She told my mother that the ghost was smiling in an evil manner at her and was going to harm her when she started praying, and the evil thing went far from her and vanished in thin air. It has been many years since this frightening experience, but whenever my mother speaks about this incident, she still starts shivering with fear, remembering the evil lady ghost. After that, we conducted many godly rituals at home and the evil atmosphere in my home disappeared and everything came to normal. The story which I am going to tell you is about a very horrifying experience my father had about 29 years back. My father had gone to visit his friend Peter, who stayed behind our building, at his room. When he knocked, the door automatically opened by itself. My father felt something strange in his house. Suddenly, he saw Peter walking in front of him. He called him twice, Peter, Peter, Peter. He did not reply back and was walking alone in his room. Now my father started feeling something very wrong in that place, and was just going to put his hand on Peter's shoulder to signal him when Peter walked through the wall in front of him and disappeared. My father got so badly scared that he came running very fast down the stairs. He was breathing heavily. Later, he told one of his friends, "I saw Peter in his house, and he did not speak a single word with me." His friend said, "My dear," to my father, "Peter went to another city, and there he breathed his last. There, his body also has been buried at Vasco, with all the rites done about a week back. How can you see him in his room?" My father told me that if he had heard his friend saying something more about Peter, he would have fallen unconscious and dead at the same place. He quietly refused to talk something else and silently came back home. Till today, my father has not forgotten about this incident. He still gets scared when he think about him walking in his room while he was dead. He had never believed in the supernatural, but this event completely changed his view. After this incident, he started reciting God books and going to the temple to pray.